Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr. and today we are going to be looking at a mono blue aggro deck. This is the deck that I used in the most recent end boss match for this past weekend's Youth Standard Pauper tournament. But before we jump into that deck tech, just want to make sure that everyone is aware of our upcoming Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. I know I've been talking about this for quite some time, and that is because I'm very excited about it, kind of regrowing the youth competitive Magic scene from the ground up. So we're going to be giving away $500 in scholarship to first place and $250 in scholarship to second place, and the format is Standard Pauper, which we're going to be looking at today. So if you are in K through 12 and you like playing Magic, you should definitely be playing Standard Pauper, especially if you live out here on Oahu. Alright, so mono blue aggro. Those words are very rarely kind of put together. Blue is kind of thought of as a controlling color, but this deck wants to be aggressive, and I think that being just one color allows for a lot of consistency, which is a very important element of playing Magic. So here we have the deck list in text. If you want to look at it, there will be a link to this in the description. For now, we're going to jump over to Magic Online, and this isn't the mono blue deck that I was talking about, but this is really the deck that kind of inspired the mono blue deck. I had been using this blue black aggro deck as the end boss deck for a couple tournaments, and it was doing pretty well. I was playing it some casual games with it as well, but when it was doing its thing, it was doing it very well. However, the majority of my losses with this deck were to getting color screwed, right? Drawing maybe only one color of mana, and then just not being able to cast half the spells in my hand. So in order to solve that problem, I had a couple options. I could play some tap lands, right? What is the submerge? I could play some tap lands, right? Comes into play tapped, but it makes 2 colors of mana. It would slow the deck down, but it would add to consistency. But since it's an aggro deck, I didn't really want to slow the deck down. So instead of trying to fix the mana base, I decided to just kind of focus on just one color. So I chose to stick with the blue instead of the black, largely because of this guy right here. Bastion Inventor has kind of risen above all the other cards so far in the format as being just one of the most powerful things you can do, especially when you pair it with Inventor's Goggles. Because in Bastion Inventor is an Artificer, Inventor's Goggles will just attach straight to it when it comes into play, and you can tap Inventor's Goggles to reduce the cost of Bastion Inventor, and even if an equipment is tapped, you'll still be able to use it. So there's almost no cost to tapping this to reduce the cost of your improvised guys. So we decided to stick with blue. You'll see a lot of these cards transferring over, but not all of them. So here, let's pull up the blue deck. Here we go, it's down here. Oh, I guess I'm missing a card. Okay, we won't look at the sideboard for now, but we will start with just the main deck. And here we have just straight mono blue aggro. One of the perks of being a monocolored deck, as I said before, is consistency, right? I'm almost never going to get color screwed in this deck. I am playing 4 colorless lands, which could cause to have some awkward draws where I only have colorless mana sources, but since there's only 4 of them, that's much less likely to happen. One island will allow me to cast all the spells in my deck besides Gearseeker Serpent. However, I still want multiple blue sources in order to cast 2 spells in one turn, since this is an aggro deck and we are looking to tempo our opponent out. So we get to play some deserts, which is relevant for this card right here, Unquenchable Thirst. This card It's an okay card if you don't have a desert, right? If a creature is attacking you, it's already tapped. Throw Unquenchable Thirst on it, it won't untap anymore. But in an aggro deck, we're going to want to be the ones attacking, not the ones getting attacked. So if you are going to play this card in an aggro deck, it's really important that you have a desert in play or in your graveyard. And then that way, if a creature is untapped and your opponent is expecting to block with it, if you have a desert, you can throw this on that creature, and then that creature won't be blocking you anymore, and it won't be attacking anymore. So that is a big bonus. So Unquenchable Thirst is one of the big pickups we get for going monocolored. We are playing some tap lands here in order to allow Unquenchable Thirst, but it might be correct to play less Desert of the Mindful and maybe just some Cradle of the Accursed, which is another desert, right? Sunscorched Desert comes into play, deals 1 damage to target player, plays into our aggro game plan, and it counts as a desert. It might be correct to play Cradle of the Accursed instead of Desert of the Mindful, since coming into play untapped might be more relevant than being able to cycle and being able to make blue mana. But that's something that only some testing will kind of figure out. For now, I wanted to focus on making sure I have enough blue sources and enough deserts for Unquenchable Thirst. So that's one of the perks of being monocolored. We get to play Unquenchable Thirst with our colorless lands. Sunscorched Desert, the damage from it might be relevant sometimes. And then let's just focus on kind of the backbone of the deck. So the backbone of the deck are the artifacts, right? If you've been following the channel, you know how much I love Hone Kopesh in this format, right? It's so cheap to play, it's so cheap to equip and move around. It allows you to play offense and defense. While this deck doesn't play defense very well, it can just use Bastion Inventor as a blocker while the rest of the evasion guys kind of chip away at your opponent. So Hone Kopesh does all those things and reduces the cost of Bastion Inventor and Gear Seeker Serpent, right? Inventor's Goggles as well. We only have 8 Artificers in the deck, 4 Aether Swoopers and 4 Bastion Inventors. But even without Artificers, Inventor's Goggle is a solid equipment. It's a little clunkier than Hone Kopesh, but it does add more defense than toughness, right, than Hone Kopesh does. So both of these together gives us 8 artifacts to help reduce the cost of Bastion Inventor and Gear Seeker Serpent. And then Aether Swooper also makes artifacts, which allows us to reduce the cost of Bastion Inventor and Gear Seeker Serpent. So we essentially have 12 artifacts in the deck to help power out our expensive guys. And then the rest of the deck is really just cheap spells. So let's focus on the creatures for now. I'm going to move these spells to the side. Alright, so there's only 20 creatures in this deck, right? 6 of them are our top-end closers. Only 2 Gear Seeker Serpent because 7 is a lot. We might have 2 artifacts in play at any given time, and even paying 5 for this is kind of a lot for a deck with 20 lands. So I'm only playing 2 Gear Seeker Serpent. Especially with 20 lands, getting 6 to make it unblockable is a lot less likely to happen, so while it's still a very good card, we're only playing 2. For Bastion Inventor, as I said, this was kind of the reason we chose to make the mono blue aggro deck. Hexproof is just so good that basically they have to beat it in combat, and if you have your equipment buffing it up, it's going to be hard for them to beat in combat, especially if you play it as on turn 4. In the match against Joe, he was playing blue-red improvise, the end boss match that we played. I think I played this guy on turn 4. My curve in game 3 was turn 1 Slitherblade, turn 2 I was playing Spellweaver Naga. Spellweaver Eternal. So I was playing this guy in that version. I chose to cut him from the list after getting to playtest it a little bit. But so I went turn 1 Slitherblade, turn 2 Spellweaver Eternal, turn 3 Inventor's Goggles, Aether Swooper, equip it, and then turn 4 attack, make a servo, and then play Bastion Inventor. right? So I spent 1 mana, 3 mana, that's 5, 6 mana. I got 2 free mana from equipping Inventor's Goggles, so that's like I spent 8 mana, and then I spent the equivalent of 14 mana by turn 4. Right, that is so much tempo. It's so hard for your opponent to come back from that. I think Joe didn't do anything on his first turn. I think he shocked something on his second turn, or on no, he played Welding Sparks. I don't remember. He killed something on one of his turns, and then played a creature on his turn 4, and just kind of crumbled to my ridiculously fast start. So that's just one example of the curve that this deck is capable of. So Bastion Inventor, very good Magic card. Aether Swooper is an auto-include if we're playing Inventor's Goggles and Bastion Inventor. Like, these cards just kind of go hand in hand. We've actually seen these 3 cards be in the last 2 winning decks, right? Luca was playing Aether Swooper, Bastion Inventor, and Inventor's Goggles, and Joe was playing Aether Swooper, Bastion Inventor, Inventor's Goggles. So these 3 cards, while they are kind of proving to be the more powerful cards in the format, they go into a lot of different decks, right? Luca was playing Blue-Green Auras, Joe was playing Blue-Red Improvise, and here this is Mono-Blue Aggro. Both of these cards were also in Blue-Black Aggro, or all 3 of these cards were in Blue-Black Aggro, right? So these are the more powerful cards, but they go into a lot of different decks. So Aether Swooper, Bastion Inventor auto-includes Slitherblade, adding to the board, start pecking away at your opponent real quickly is very relevant, and then especially in the later game when you can start throwing equipment onto it, it turns into a very significant clock. This Cloaked Herald is not as good. Being a 1/1 means that it dies to stuff like Dual Shot, Chandra's Pyrohelix, Skullduggery, stuff like that. But I think we just wanted to fill out the curve and make sure we had enough bodies to be able to consistently pressure our opponents. So we're only playing 2 because it's not as good as Slitherblade, but it's still very good. The last creature that we have here, as I said before, I had Spellweaver Eternal, which was in the blue-black deck, and I really liked it in the blue-black deck. But this deck, because a lot of its spells are kind of reactive, we're not playing Opt in this deck, I decided to cut the Spellweaver Eternal. It's really our only cheap creature that doesn't have evasion, so I cut it for another cheap creature that has evasion. Kitesail Corsair, 1 toughness, so it is susceptible to a lot of the Dual Shot, Skullduggery, Chandra's Pyrohelix, cards like that. But it is just, you get bang for your buck. 2 mana, 2/1, flying when attacking. Holds equipment very well. Very solid card. I like it more than Spellweaver Eternal in this deck. It might be wrong. There might be enough spells for Spellweaver Eternal, but Spellweaver Eternal. Excuse me, still fighting this cold. Spellweaver Eternal is at its best when you have stuff like combat tricks, right? Especially Skullduggery in the blue-black deck. Spellweaver Eternal, you could attack. They could block thinking their guy was going to be big enough. Maybe block. And then you could Skullduggery, shrink their guy, pump up another attacker you have to push through damage, and then put Spellweaver Eternal out of range of dying in combat, and then do it all again next turn. And you trigger Afflict if they block. So Spellweaver Eternal, very nice when you have combat tricks. Blue does not have very many combat tricks. We lose Skullduggery as one of the cards that we're not playing anymore, but it might be correct to still include some number of Spellweaver Eternal. Maybe split on the Corsairs. Could also trim some Gearseeker Serpents if we need to. So those are the creatures. Very aggressive creatures. We're only playing 20, but those are the creatures. They all wear equipment very well, right? Having evasion, having hexproof. They all wear equipment very well. So I already spoke about Unquenchable Thirst. That's kind of our catch-all removal spell. And then the last 8 cards in the deck, um, we have 4 Essence Scatter and 4 Unsummon. Unsummon, very, very good Magic card. It's not good against every deck. You don't want to be returning creatures with Enter the Battlefield effects to your opponent's hand, unless you're going to really take advantage of the tempo that you're gaining from doing Unsummon. But especially if your opponent is playing big creatures, Unsummon is going to be very powerful. If they're playing big creatures and if they're playing equipment and auras, right? Lots of people playing cartouches. Unsummon is very, very good against that. So Unsummon lets us kind of take advantage of tempo. And then the last card in the deck is Essence Scatter. I don't know if this should necessarily be a 4 of, because the deck does not do very much with untapped mana, right? Counterspells are at their best when they're in a deck that has lots of other instants. So if your opponent doesn't play a creature that you want to counter, you can still use your mana that turn in other ways, like drawing cards. Essence Scatter being in the deck is actually one of the reasons why I was okay playing for Desert of the Mindful, because if they don't play a creature that you want to counter, you want to save your Essence Scatter, you can still have a chance of using your mana to cycle Desert of the Mindful. But it is a little awkward, especially with the equipment. Excuse me. Like, if your opponent is very aware, and they notice that you don't move your equipment post-combat, or you don't equip your equipment when they think it would be beneficial, you'll kind of tip them off that you have an Essence Scatter in your hand. And Joe actually did this in the end boss match. I caught him with an Essence Scatter in game 1, and then in game 2 he saw that I had 2 mana open and decided to play his Sweatworks Brawler instead of his Bastion Inventor, and I had to Essence Scatter the Sweatworks Brawler because I would have just fallen behind on tempo, not using my mana that turn. And then he played the Bastion Inventor the next turn, and I was in some trouble. So he did win game 2, largely because of him smartly playing around Essence Scatter. So, this card, it might not be worth having 4 in the deck, but it is a powerful enough effect, and it is one of the best answers to Bastion Inventor in the format. So we have 4 in the deck for now. I could see an argument being made to cut this maybe for more creatures. Who knows? This deck is definitely not perfect. So that is the main deck. I wasn't really sure what to include in the sideboard. One of the pitfalls of having a one-color deck, one of the pitfalls of having a monocolored deck is you don't have very many good sideboard options, right? You do get consistency with your mana, but you lose out on sideboard options. So what I did with this sideboard, and this is completely theoretical, I did not playtest this at all. The match I played against Joe with this deck, we did not sideboard. He did not have a sideboard, so I did not sideboard. But this sideboard plan right now is to just be able to shift into a control deck. So if your opponent has tons of removal, you're not expecting your Slither Blades and Mistcloaked Heralds, and cheap creatures to be able to get the job done. If your opponent has a ton of removal, then you can sideboard into kind of a slower game plan that looks to kind of control the board, right? You get to play more counter spells. This is an instant that allows you to kind of use your mana. If you leave mana up for a counter and you don't want to use your counter spell, you can still make use of your mana. So, this goes along with the control game plan. And then just more hexproof creatures. So, this guy costs a lot. 7 mana is a lot, but you can always cycle him if you're nowhere near 7 mana. And having hexproof means that if all of your opponent's removal spells are not going to be able to kill this thing. So, and then we've got 3 lands in the sideboard as well, because getting to 7 mana is not very feasible with only 20 lands in the deck. So we have 3 lands in the sideboard to kind of shift into this control deck. Control decks really don't want to miss land drops. So I don't know how good that sideboard plan is, but that's what we've got in the board for now. And yeah, that is mono blue aggro. I really just threw this deck together at the tournament because I wanted to try it out, try to fix some of the problems I was having with blue black aggro. And it worked out. I was able to win the end boss match against Joe playing blue red improvise. So, let me know what you think about the deck. If you want to give it a spin, I would highly recommend it. It's fun to play. There's lots of interesting decisions, especially when it comes to choosing where to put your equipment, choosing when to be attacking and when to kind of hold your creatures back to block, knowing when to use Essence Scatter and what creatures to put Unquenchable Thirst on. Lots of interesting decisions with this deck. So it's fun to play, it's consistent, it's powerful. I would highly recommend it for anyone who likes playing blue but wants to be attacking with creatures. So that is all for today. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you like what we do here and you want to support Youth Magic on Oahu and Standard Pauper in general, please check out our Patreon page. Voluntary subscription service. You choose how much you want to donate each month, and you'll get sweet perks depending on how much you decide to donate. So check out our Patreon page, support what we do, let us know what you think. We check all the comments and respond to all the comments on our videos, so would love to hear from you guys, just in terms of what you think about the decks, what you think about Standard Pauper, what decks, if you've been brewing any decks and you want to share them, definitely let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you later.